Hey guys, I'm HayleeTattooer, and to celebrate my YouTube channel so far, I'm going to take the time to tell you guys a little bit more about myself and about my journey into and through the tattooing industry. So just a little bit of background about myself. I grew up in central Queensland in Australia, and I was just like an artsy kid, a bit of a nerdy kid, a bit of a tomboy. Did quite well through school, actually, very, very well through school. I was a bit of a square, bit of a teacher's pet, never did anything wrong, never wagged school, that kind of thing. So I wasn't into a bad crowd or anything like that. I was just a regular kid. So I graduated from high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought that maybe I wanted to do animating, perhaps try and aim for like a high-end job like Pixar or like a CGI kind of thing, but at that stage in my life I wasn't really prepared to leave the comforts of home and travel to sort of a capital city or an overseas city to undertake the university requirements for that. So I found myself at the end of high school wondering what I was going to do. I didn't know, so I put out a bunch of resumes and I landed myself a job in financial planning, in administration. So that was actually a good job. I worked with a great bunch of people. They sent me overseas to a conference in India, so I got to experience India firsthand. That was fantastic. But being behind a computer for 2.5 years really kind of dampened my creative spirit. So I started thinking about alternative options. Up until that point, I had no tattoos. I didn't have a lot of experience with tattoos. My father had a couple and I grew up around a lot of people heavily covered in tattoos, so I never sort of questioned it. It was just always there. So the thing that really put it into my head was I went on a trip down to the Gold Coast in Queensland with a couple of friends of mine, and one of the friends wanted to get a tattoo. So we went to a couple of the tattoo studios and checked out a few portfolios and got quotes and that kind of thing. And it was at that point where I was kind of like, people do this for a living? Like, people draw on people and just like have fun and get to, you know, experience tattooing and use their creative skills for an actual job. Because I guess in my mind, when I was in high school, I had this really alternative art teacher, and he always said to me, Hayley, don't follow art as a career. You may end up as a teacher to pay the bills and you'll be miserable like me. And I believed him, and he was a great art teacher and he gave me good feedback, but he was just trying to protect me from his path. So yeah, so I never kind of thought after that point in my head that art was a good career option. But after that trip down to the Gold Coast, I thought to myself, wow, that's really something that I would like to look into. It seems so creative. So I went online and did a lot of research, like how to get a tattoo apprenticeship, that kind of thing. I was 19 at the time, and a lot of the feedback that I seen on forums and that kind of thing online was, don't do it from home. Great advice. Put together a portfolio, go and pay your dues at the local tattoo studio, put your name out there, put your art out there, and just hope that an apprenticeship position opens up or you impress them enough to create an apprenticeship position. So I stuck with my financial planning job and really started diving back into my art because I had a little break from it for a while. So I started creating another portfolio. I didn't have any idea what to put in it. I put in sketches, I put in sort of little doodle pictures that I'd done like on the sides of books. I cut them out and glued them into a portfolio, photography stuff that I had edited, and large-scale drawings of portraits, drawings of tattoo style, like I guess you would call it like new school sort of stuff that I put in there, a little bit of color, a little bit of black and gray. So I scanned them all into a computer and printed out a couple of really high resolution copies of them, put a resume of my work experience and a cover letter of how much I was ready to devote myself to the art of tattooing if somebody was willing to teach me, put it into a couple of bound portfolios with a nice front and put them in my car, ready to take to a couple of tattoo studios. But I was 19 and I was very, very shy at the time, so I didn't sort of get the motivation to go and do it, just, you know, like cold call. But I had a friend from school who contacted me and said, hey, I know you're interested in tattooing. I'm going to the tattoo studio to get a tattoo. Would you like to come with me? So I did. I came with her and I sat with her during her tattoo appointment, and the artist was constantly taking his gloves off to try and get the phone, answer the phone. The shop was just so busy. There were people coming in, the phone was just running off the hook. And he just sort of said in frustration, we need an apprentice or somebody in here to answer the phones. I'm sick of answering the phones. And I just said, I'll do it. And he kind of looked at me and was like, what do you mean? And I said, I actually came here to talk to you guys about a job. I have a portfolio in the car. He said, go get it. So I went and got my portfolio and I brought it in. He had a flick through it and didn't say much. He said, I'm going to talk to the boss. We'll give you a call if something happens. So I went home, and at the time, mobiles and that weren't really a thing. So I had my parents' home phone number down, and yeah, so I got a call from the guy and he said, the boss wants to see you, come into the studio when you can. So I pretty much just jumped in my car and came straight in, and I was expecting to have like an interview process, that kind of thing. And the boss was this like 60-year-old dude covered in tattoos, long hair, like big jewels on all his fingers and rough as guts. And he just said, rightio, we'll get you started. We're gonna have to get some little machines because you've only got tiny hands, and we're gonna have you over here, and you know, the boys aren't happy about it, but you just have to prove them wrong. And that was how I got my job in tattooing. So he put me over in, he had 2 studios. He put me over in his second studio, which was a tiny little tattoo studio. And I was working with a couple of guys there, and I just started drawing. And for those who don't know, tattoo apprenticeships are unpaid. So you are there in your own time, not getting paid. It's commission only. You're not doing tattoos for several months. So you're just there showing that you really want to do it. So I was doing Monday to Friday in my financial planning job, 9 to 5, Saturday and Sunday all day at the tattoo parlor. And I was doing things like cleaning barrels, all the steel barrels, using the sterilizer, mopping the floors, drawing up tattoo designs, or trying to draw up tattoo designs, because at that point I didn't have any idea of like how much fine detail could be put into a tattoo. So I was drawing them up way too detailed for the size. So the guys there, one guy in particular, he gave me a lot of mentoring and taught me the basics of how to set up a machine and what all the equipment was for, and very, very small amount of knowledge about how to tune a machine, how to stencil correctly, just all the really, really basic stuff. So I did that for several months. I had to obtain my infection control course, and that's through the TAFE. So I had to do like a really cringy video of myself washing my hands and that, and sent that off to the TAFE, had to wait for that to come back. And then after a little while I was allowed to do my first tattoo, and my dad offered up as my test dummy. So I had practiced on skins and that before that, and as a joke my boss made me tattoo a fiberglass mannequin. That was really difficult because it's hard and the needle doesn't penetrate it, so you're basically trying to drill it with a very, very fine needle. Yeah, like I said, it was a bit of a joke. So yeah, tried to get through that. And yeah, I had a couple of good mentors at that studio that really helped me. So the tattoo on my dad was a redback spider, turned out not too bad. And then from that point it was just finding other people that were willing to get free tattoos because they knew that I was starting. And you know, after I started getting a little bit good at the free tattoos, and I started charging very, very small amounts for tattoos until I got better and better and better, and so on and so forth. So that's about it of how I got into tattooing. So yeah, it wasn't the most difficult apprenticeship. I did have to deal with a lot of naysayers because there weren't any female tattoo artists in my town at the moment. There was one within probably 300 kilometers, there was one female tattoo artist already. And it was very much a male-dominated industry back then, very much a sort of old school industry. The studios that I worked at were very, very old-fashioned, quite rough, still working into like professionalism and that kind of thing. And that was actually a really big step for me, going from like a super professional, like high-end clients and, you know, catering everything to clients in financial planning, to like this rough as guts tattoo industry that I had no experience with. And yeah, it was apples and oranges. It was quite a wild ride for a while there. So then the owner of that studio, I started to do a lot better, got a lot of clients, so he moved me over to the main studio where I would have my own room. So I got to work with a different crew of people, and I met my best friend Tia, who was also working there at the time as well, and she sort of started 6 months after me, so we kind of started going through the industry together. So that studio that I moved to was, again, another very rough studio. The interior hadn't been sort of updated in 20 years. The boss was very old-fashioned, did like super cool old sort of 70s, 80s style, like biker flash kind of stuff. It was definitely like a street shop. All of the things that we did were like super little walk-ins, and then, you know, slowly people develop a little bit more trust and get the bigger jobs. And then after a while, our boss, who was pretty business savvy, kind of understood that Tia and I were aiming for a more professional, like a more sort of set out what to expect. You don't sort of walk into the tattoo parlor and be like, wow, like I'm surrounded by criminals or something like that, which they weren't, but you know, a lot of our clients felt that way, and a lot more women were getting tattooed now that they had 2 women in the industry in our town. So he wanted to create a nicer space, so he moved us over into a brand new shop and sort of let us do our own thing there. So that was fantastic. We were there. That was called Gallery Inc. Tia and I sort of built that up and did what we could with that. But at that time, what happened was, in Australia, the government started taking a little bit more focus on what motorcycle gangs were doing, and they noticed that a lot of motorcycle gangs were money laundering their drug money through tattoo parlors. Not all tattoo parlors, but there was a lot of it going on sort of at the Gold Coast of Queensland and the north coast of New South Wales. So the government really quickly, to try and squash down what was happening in the gangs, brought in these tattoo industry laws, which we had never seen before. So basically the tattoo industry laws are looking at individual tattoo artists and like studio owners as well, and trying to make sure that they have no connections and no affiliations with motorcycle gangs, or I should say like illegal or outlaw motorcycle gangs they call them, to try and cut off that money laundering supply, to try and cut off the money to these bikie gangs. So they brought in these licenses. We had to fill out this huge license application, bearing our souls, sending photos, identification, we had to get fingerprinted, like ID checked, all of those things, and they gave us 6 months to do that. So there's 2 different licenses, one for artists, one for shop owners. The artist has to work under a shop owner, under an operator. So I sent away my artist application, got back a confirmation, and then we were waiting and waiting, but my boss wasn't getting a confirmation of his operator license, and they gave us until sort of like the 1st of June to like an amnesty period to put in these applications, and then you could still operate while they were being processed, because they said the processing could take up to 18 months. So if you didn't apply before then, you would have to stop tattooing and wait for your license. So it sort of got to like the end of May, and our boss had not gotten a confirmation back, and I started to think, wow, if he does not get approved to one of these licenses, I actually don't have anywhere to work. So I sat down, had a really hard think, and I put in my application very quietly for an operator license, and I sent away all of the things just in case he did not get approved. I didn't tell anybody because it's a very political industry, and it would have been very difficult for me to keep tattooing out of that studio if they had found out. But in the end, he actually got declined for that license for reasons unknown. So it was a very difficult day for us, because we got a letter in the mail, the boss got a letter in the mail saying, you have been deemed unfit to operate a tattoo studio. You are closed next day of business. So we're all sitting there being like, so we don't have a job. We don't have jobs because we have to work for a licensed studio. We now don't have jobs. And I thought to myself, wow, lucky, so lucky that I had put in my operator license. So then it was kind of like, wow, I really need to open a studio. So I just spoke to a family member who I knew had a commercial space for lease, and I did all of the renovating and everything within a 3-week period. So it was like bang, 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 floors, paint, aircon, plumbing, you know, like getting it all organized and getting into that shop as quickly as possible. So because I couldn't work anywhere. So yeah, that was the start of the Arrows End Tattoo Parlor, and that was 5 years ago. I opened my own studio. It was just myself and my co-worker Jake, and we just worked out of that little studio for a little bit. And then we had a few people come and join us, and my friend Tia came over and joined us when I went on maternity leave. And then we sort of grew out of the space that we were in, and we moved into this lovely space. So now we have 5 tattoo artists, and we also share the space with a barber studio called Thieves and Beggars. So we've got 2 to 3 barbers in here, sort of down the front, doing super mad haircuts, and yeah, like I'm living my best life now. So I've got 2 kids. I've got a boy and a girl, Theo and Mercury, and I just divide my time between tattooing Tuesday to Fridays, and I focus on large scale pieces, mostly black and grey realism, some medium colour work, so I do enjoy a little bit of colour too. And yeah, that's my story in tattooing so far. So thanks for listening. I know it was a bit of a ramble, but that gives you guys like a bit more of an understanding of my background and where I come from. So that all happened over the period of 11 years. So I've been tattooing for over 11 years now, and it's the best job in the world, and I couldn't ask for anything more, so very lucky. If you've got any questions about my journey, or questions about your own journey, chuck them in the comments below, and take a snoop over at my Instagram, HayleeTattooer, for some examples of my work and my life and my stories. So yeah, thanks for listening. See ya.